I thought they were junk. Fake paintings, replica statues, cheap souvenirs from places he'd been before we met. The kind of stuff you see in a college dorm room and think, he'll grow out of this. He didn't grow out of it, so I got rid of it. And now he's gone. Not the collection. Him. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 9, and for all 9 of those years my husband had a room, a spare bedroom that he'd claimed as his own, his office, his space. I use those words loosely because it wasn't an office. It was a museum, a cluttered, chaotic, floor-to-ceiling collection of things. Prints of famous paintings, not originals, obviously, reproductions, the kind you buy framed at a home goods store. Replica artifacts from historical periods I couldn't name, small sculptures that looked like they came from a gift shop at a natural history museum, model ships, antique maps that weren't actually antique, a suit of armor, decorative, not functional, standing in the corner like a silent, ridiculous sentinel. I hated that room. I hated walking past it. I hated when guests would see it and politely pretend it was interesting. I hated that an entire room of our house, a room that could have been a nursery, a guest room, a proper home office, was dedicated to what I saw as a man's inability to let go of his adolescent aesthetic. But I didn't say anything. Not directly, not clearly. Because that's the thing about resentment. It doesn't announce itself, it whispers. It builds, in stacks, one quiet frustration on top of another until the pile is so high, you can't see over it anymore. And by the time you notice the pile, you've confused it with righteous conviction. He went on a business trip. 4 days. And somewhere between dropping him off at the airport and coming home to an empty house, I made a decision. I was going to redo the room. Not redecorate it, redo it. Clear it out completely. Paint the walls, buy proper furniture, turn it into the guest room we'd been talking about for years, the one we never got around to because his collection was always in the way. I told myself this was a gift, a surprise, that he'd come home, see the beautiful, functional room I'd created, and realize that what I'd replaced was better than what had been there. I told myself he'd see the fresh paint and the clean lines and the grown-up furniture and understand that I'd done him a favor, that I'd freed him from clutter he was too sentimental to release on his own. I told myself he'd thank me. I look back at that thought now and it makes me want to scream. I started packing. Some things went into boxes in the garage. Some things went into the trash. And some things, the ones I genuinely couldn't see any value in, the cheap reproductions and the plastic replicas, went to Goodwill. I loaded them into my car without ceremony, without hesitation, without pausing to consider that the weight of each object might be more than physical. It took me 2 days. By the time I was done, the room was unrecognizable. Fresh paint, new curtains, a proper desk, a bed for guests. It looked like a room in an adult's home, finally. I stood in the doorway and felt proud of myself. That pride lasted approximately 6 hours. He walked in the door on a Thursday evening, dropped his bag, made small talk about the flight, and then he went to his room, like he always did after a trip, to decompress, to sit in his space, to be surrounded by the things that made him feel at home. He opened the door. The silence that followed was unlike any silence I have ever experienced. Not empty silence, full silence. A silence so thick with shock that it had a physical weight. The kind of silence that makes the air feel solid. The kind where the house itself seems to hold its breath. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything or slam the door. He turned around, looked at me, and in the flattest voice I have ever heard him use, said, "Where is everything?" Not a question, a statement, a demand wrapped in disbelief. I redecorated. Surprise, the room looks so much better, and where is everything? The look in his eyes stopped me mid-sentence. I had expected surprise, maybe mild annoyance. I had prepared responses for, "You should have asked first," or "I wish you'd told me." I had not prepared for what I was actually seeing, which was grief. Raw, unfiltered, immediate grief. The kind that makes a person's face change. The kind that drains the color from their skin, the kind that ages someone 5 years in 5 seconds. What I learned over the next few hours, through broken sentences and long silences, and the kind of quiet crying a grown man does when he doesn't want to be seen doing it, is that I had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The collection wasn't junk. The prints weren't random reproductions he'd grabbed off a clearance rack. They were specific pieces he'd been collecting since he was 14. Each one connected to a memory. A trip with his grandfather to a museum in Boston when he was 15. His grandfather, who had immigrated from Greece and never stopped missing the art of the old world, who stood in front of a Vermeer reproduction and wept because it reminded him of a painting in his mother's kitchen. A study abroad semester in Rome, where he bought his first replica because he couldn't afford the real thing. A gift from his late father, a model ship that his dad had built by hand over the course of a year, working in the garage every Saturday morning while listening to the same radio station, sanding each piece to fit. The suit of armor wasn't a joke. It was from a Renaissance fair he'd attended with his best friend the summer before the friend died in a car accident. They'd pooled their money, both working minimum wage jobs, both 17, and bought it as a shared trophy of the best day of their lives. The maps weren't decorative filler. They were tracings of routes his family had traveled during their immigration to the United States 3 generations ago, hand-drawn by his great-grandmother from memory. Irreplaceable. A small clay figure I'd tossed in the trash was something he'd made with his mother in an art class when he was 6. She'd kept it on her mantle until she died. He'd kept it on his shelf, and I'd thrown it in the garbage bag. Every single object in that room had a story, a history, a meaning I had never asked about, because I had never asked. And I had looked at those objects and seen clutter. I had looked at them and seen a problem to solve. I had never once sat down with my husband and said, "Tell me about this piece. Why do you keep it? What does it mean to you?" I had assumed they were worthless because I didn't understand their worth. Some of it was in the garage, in boxes, recoverable. I'd been careless with the packing, but most of it was intact. Some of it was at Goodwill. We went together the next morning. It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. Standing in a donation center under those flat fluorescent lights, explaining to a confused employee that I needed to buy back items I had donated 12 hours ago. The employee looked at me like I was insane. Some of it was still there. Some of it had already been put out on the floor. Priced at $2. His grandfather's Vermeer print. The one that made an old Greek man cry sitting in a wire bin between a broken lamp and a picture frame with someone else's family photo still in it. The model ship, the one his father built, was gone. Sold to someone for $1.50. We never found it. My husband didn't speak to me for 11 days. Not the silent treatment, not a punishment. He simply had nothing to say to me. He moved through the house like a ghost. He ate meals alone. He slept in the guest room, the one I had built on top of the ruins of his identity. The irony was so thick it made me nauseous. I want to be clear about something. I am not the victim of this story, I am the villain. I know that. I knew it the moment I saw his face, and I've known it every day since. What I did was not redecorating. What I did was erasure. I looked at the physical manifestation of my husband's inner life, his memories, his grief, his joy, his history, and I decided it wasn't worth the space it occupied. I didn't consult him. I didn't ask permission. I didn't even warn him. I waited until he was gone, and I dismantled the most personal room in our house because I wanted a guest bedroom. A guest bedroom. For guests who visit maybe twice a year. I prioritized hypothetical visitors over the man I married. And here's the part that shames me the most. I didn't just throw things away. I judged them first. I held each object, weighed it against my own understanding of value, and found it wanting. I was the arbiter. I was the authority. I decided what mattered and what didn't in a room that wasn't mine, about a life that wasn't mine to curate. People online told me I committed the ultimate boundary violation, that I showed my husband that his emotional life is secondary to my aesthetic preferences, that the room wasn't about the objects, it was about respect, about whether your partner sees you as a full person with an inner world or as a roommate whose stuff takes up too much space. They were right. Every single one of them. We're still married, technically. He moved back into the bedroom after 3 weeks. He speaks to me normally, about logistics, about meals, about the practical infrastructure of sharing a home. We discuss groceries, we coordinate schedules. We exist in the mechanical rhythms of cohabitation. But something is missing. The warmth, the ease, the sense that this house belongs to both of us equally. He doesn't leave personal items in common spaces anymore. His new room, a smaller closet-sized space he's claimed as his own, has a lock on the door. He installed it himself. He didn't ask my opinion. He didn't tell me he was doing it. I came home one evening and heard the drill. The sound of a man installing a deadbolt on a closet door inside his own house, because his wife taught him that nothing he loves is safe in shared space. I don't blame him. The model ship is still gone. I've searched online. I've contacted Goodwill locations across the state. I've posted on collector forums, a hand-built model ship made by a man who is now dead, donated by his daughter-in-law who didn't understand what she was holding. It's just gone. And every time I see the empty space on the shelf where it used to sit, the shelf he rebuilt in his new room, smaller, more guarded, behind a locked door, I understand exactly what I destroyed. Not a collection, a trust. The fundamental trust that the person you share your life with will treat the things you love with care. I broke that. And I don't know if it comes back. Can this marriage survive? Or is the damage too deep? And here's the question that's eating at me. Have you ever thrown something away that turned out to matter more than you realized? I need to know I'm not the only one who's made a mistake this big.